There's a webcomic that was published a few years ago by Merriweather poking fun at how little respect and appreciation the healer of the party gets in relation to how critical they are to the success and literal survival of your team. It's a very cute and funny one-shot that also comments on the type of treatment support players have to go through by their other teammates despite being just as important to the team as everyone else. The support role in any team-based game is either seen as the first and foremost priority or the role no one cares about. Usually that correlates to how necessary they are for the particular boss or content you're about to undergo, but in competitive genres like MOBAs, shooters and whatnot, predispositions towards supportive roles are usually negative both from a gameplay and social standpoint. On one hand, they're seen as glorified cheerleaders played by those who lack the skill to play one of the more quote-unquote carry-based roles. On another hand, they're viewed as extraneous parts of a team, helpful but ultimately non-essential in achieving victory. However, even if and when they're given the rare opportunity to take a more front stage position for the team, they become public enemy number one, with other players outraging over how much agency supports have. While I've covered the ostensible decline of appreciation for roles like top and ADC in the past, the difference between those two roles and support is that support has never been appreciated by the League community at large, highlighted by how many people type autofill support in champ select and ask for a role swap. At the same time, so much is expected from the support player, and the decisions they make from one moment to the next might be the catalyst that ultimately brings your team to victory. How can a role be so integral to a team's ability to function yet receive so little respect? Today, we'll be discussing why support is the most thankless role in League of Legends. Just a moment though before we begin, Hextech Store is hosting a giveaway on their Discord server for the new Ahri skin that was released today. Yes, the Faker Ahri skin, the one that costs your soul to get it. So definitely check it out. You can find their Discord server on their website or by using the links down in the video description. Additionally, if you're big on Hextech crafting, feel free to browse their goods. You can buy orbs, chests, and other stuff at a discounted price. Good luck to everyone joining the giveaway, but for now let's get back to the video. We should first begin by outlining what exactly is the responsibility of a support. For top lane, the fundamental goal is to draw pressure by any means necessary, whether by posing a threat to side lanes or by being a big meat shield for your team. For jungle, the goal is to usher the team into a more favorable mid game through their actions in the early game. For AD carries, the goal is to stack up items so later you can shoot anything that moves. But what about support? Ask 10 people what they think the job of a support is, and I can assure you none of them will be able to agree on what the central theme of the role is. That's because there is no central theme of the role. While the challenge of playing jungle is that there are so many ways to exert pressure on the map, an advantage they do have is that all avenues towards success entail proactivity. The jungler is expected to do many things, but the onus is on them to get it done. Hence why jungle is often touted for having the most carry potential, as they get to make the first move. Support's the opposite. They also have many expectations, but all avenues towards success entail reactivity. Whatever the situation is and how it progresses, it's the job as a support to adapt to the changes in circumstance between game to game, or even between minute to minute within the same game. A reason for this is that the key distinction between support and the other four roles is their association with pressure. While top jungle, mid, and bot lane are known to exert pressure, support is the only role in the game who can both exert pressure and alleviate it. One of the primary duties of a support is to establish and control vision around the map. Vision to this day is something the vast majority of players don't have a firm appreciation of. If you were given the option to completely remove Fog of War for your team only, that includes not just regular Fog of War but even Fog of War between brushes, that alone will probably increase your win rate from 50 to 65% or even higher. With total vision of the map, your team should ideally never fall victim to a gank, never let the enemy team sneak Baron or Dragon, never get backdoored, never get ambushed by a death brush, never have to worry about face checking or anything like that. While this is practically unachievable in a normal setting, supports carry the most burden when it comes to establishing vision. In addition to being able to see your opponent, ensuring they can't see you is equally as crucial. As the saying goes, knowledge is half the battle. And in a game like League, element of surprise may be the sole determining factor behind a successful strategy and a failed one. Here's the problem, vision is only ever the setup of an outcome, not the direct cause behind it. This reminds me of one of my favorite quotes of all time, and it very succinctly describes how much we take vision for granted. Someone's sitting in the shade today because someone planted a seed a long time ago. That quote highlights the importance of how a simple action now, one that appears to be trivial in the present day, could be a major contribution later down the road. Much of what emboldens or discourages a team from taking action is information or lack thereof. I'm sure all of us have gone through moments where we hesitated on attacking an isolated target because we assumed their team was nearby, even though in actuality they were completely alone. Having vision of them can give you the confidence to take actions that eventually compound into victory. And yet, when your mid laner assassinates the enemy jungler after spotting them all by their lonesome, which allows your team to then get a free Baron or Elder Drake, most players will be quick to give compliments to the mid laner for making a potentially game-winning pick, and yet give no mention to the support for having the foresight to set up vision beforehand. I'm aware that supports aren't the only ones who can place down wards. Everyone can have a control ward and a trinket, but considering they're the only ones capable of storing and placing multiple wards at once, more often than not, the vision you have around the map is done almost entirely by the support, especially in the mid to late game when most champions buy oracles or Farsight. Regardless, this extends beyond vision. In many cases, the reason you and your team have the confidence to make the decisions you do from game to game is because the support is there to make it possible. Therein lies the main difficulty of playing and mastering support. People claim that the role is the easiest to pick up since all you have to do if you're playing Blitzcrank for example is to land a hook on a priority target, or if you're playing Lulu, all you have to do is spam shields and buffs on your carry. What separates the good supports from the bad, however, is the aforementioned long-term mindset and how well you understand the ways you can make an impact. Yes, micromechanically supports are not all that difficult to play, but macromechanically they have the most to think about in light of having to adjust their decisions based on how the other 9 champions are playing. The decisions you make in the early to mid game lay the groundwork for how the late game will play out. It might not happen or be noticeable right now or even in the next 5 minutes, but League has always been a game known for butterfly effects. Hypothetically, you can attribute the loss of a 1-hour game to your ADC getting caught, thus dooming you all, or you can blame the loss on a series of incorrect decisions you made that prolonged the game for as long as it did. This applies to everyone of course, but support by design is expected to be the one that plants the tree, to be the one that triggers the butterfly effect. For instance, when Yuumi came out, the reason people despised having her on their team even though she had the potential to make a champion 1v9 is that she spends the first 10 to 15 minutes doing complete f***all sitting down in bot lane, which gives the enemy support free reign to move around the map and start getting stuff done. Since then, people were made to believe that bad supports are the ones who sit in lane all day while good supports roam. But sometimes this isn't always a worthwhile action to take, as you have to gauge the opportunity cost of such a decision. If Pyke or Alistar leave their bot lane all alone while they follow the jungler to 3-man top or mid, they're taking a massive gamble on whether their ADC can hold to 1v2 without bleeding out too much. Best case scenario, you get the gank and snowball your other lanes, while your ADC plays weak side as best they can to minimize losses. Even if things go well though and you get your top or mid laner fed, your ADC might blame you for abandoning them, and worst case scenario, ultimately causing your team the loss because the enemy Draven capitalized on the numbers advantage to go 5-0 and have an ADCS lead by 10 minutes. The inverse can also happen where the enemy support decides to roam and you do your best trying to snowball a 2v1. Even if your ADC gets fed, the rest of your team might be yelling at you for not helping out despite a Nami trying to roam to counter a Pyke being a suicide mission. Supports like a UX designer, their job is to make the game as smooth and brainless as possible. Accomplishing this is the expectation, not the rule. In essence, you only ever get a neutral response from your team or a negative one. Maybe 1 out of every 20 games or so you get a team that unanimously recognizes the sheer amount of work you put into a game, but the other 19 times your team will disregard everything that you did well and only find fault in what you didn't do. That's because players subconsciously expect so much from you while simultaneously believing you're not capable of doing that much. Seldom, if ever, are the actions of a support grand or ostentatious. More accurately, 90% of the things they do are small, unnoticeable even, yet they can make all the difference between winning or losing a fight. I already talked about how a single premeditated planning of a ward could pay off in dividends later on, but it goes beyond that. Earlier I remarked on how support is the only role that can both exert pressure and alleviate it. Few players appreciate or even notice the latter. When looking for reasons why your team wins the game, every single time it'll be something like you caught out the enemy jungler, or you backdoored their base, or you got a 5-man ultimate. Never is it something like Morgana black shielded me from getting Lux rooted, or Janna kept me alive for another 2 seconds which gave me just enough time to kill their assassin before I died, or Braum took the blitz hook for me. Once in a blue moon, the play will be so massive like how Biofrost rescued Doublelift from impact by the skin of his teeth.
They're cutting him off! Oh, it's gonna be bad news here. Doublelift now in a bit of trouble. Hype is gonna proc Impact. Will keep chasing in. Bounces on his head. Doublelift falls to flat. Misses the net. And Impact gonna chase him down. One more on him. Gets the door! Now they're gonna stun him up! They get her under the turret and
But that was only because it was shown on camera in front of thousands of viewers. Virtually all instances of pressure being alleviated for your team go unnoticed. Small as they may be in relativity, they carry just as much weight as those big flashy plays. Enchanter supports often get the short end for this. In solo queue, champions like Soraka, Janna, Sona and stuff are disliked on the basis of them not being as proactive or having the same playmaking potential as engaged supports like Leona, Thresh, Pyke and such. And that leads us to the next cause of frustration for support players, their picks. Supports can only do so many things at once. They either make stuff happen, help stuff happen, or stop stuff from happening, never all 3 at the same time. The closest we've ever gotten to a champion who can both engage and support is Rakan, and even he struggles to have the same oomph as a fully dedicated engage or buffing support. I'm sure countless times we ran into situations where our team had a Leona or Thresh, but we really wish we had a Soraka or Janna instead, and vice versa. This ties back to the whole long-term thinking again, where circumstances can deteriorate to where what was once originally a good idea is now a bad one. The dynamic between Engage and Enchanter supports always fascinated me. Obviously Blitz, Thresh, and Nautilus are much more impactful in the early to mid game because hard CC has immediate value, but once you get to the mid to late game and your heals and shields mitigate hundreds if not thousands of HP, champs like Sona, Lulu, and Jada become literal gods. At the same time, enchanters can still beat tanks in the early game by buffing the ADC enough to kill the enemy faster, and tanks can still beat enchanters in the late game by scoring a game-winning pick. It's easier for players to zero in on what the support doesn't bring to the table than what they actually do. ADC mains in particular are the most vocal about this given the nature of bot lane where supports are considered the real ADCs until the ADCs buy a couple items. Instead of the team adjusting to the differences in circumstance, the support's expected to, even if they physically cannot. A late game Alistar definitely exerts a lot less pressure than a late game Taric. Alistar can do everything right but still get told support gap because the other 8 players directly compare the two supports as if they're a 1v1 matchup. But support's the only role where you shouldn't and can't compare the two champions 1-to-1. One of the easiest ways for a top jungle mid and ADC to exert dominance over their opponent is to kill them. A support killing another support doesn't do anything to advance their game state, and yet players feel inclined to treat them as if they're directly competing against each other. Calling back to the earlier example of your team's support staying in lane to scale their ADC while the enemy support roams and ganks top and mid, everyone's knee-jerk reaction is to judge how much more the enemy support's getting done around the map expecting their team's support to do the same thing. But not every support has the capacity to roam and gank. For many of them, sometimes the best course of action is to stay down in bot lane. The team has to recognize this and adapt accordingly. They can't expect a Soraka to follow a Bard or Nautilus through the jungle. Just like how you can't judge a Malzahar with the same checklist as Katarina, you can't judge an Enchanter support the same way you judge a tank support, and yet people do. The community at large oversimplifies the responsibilities and more importantly capabilities of a support, when in reality it's not that simple. The vast majority of things a good support player does throughout a match can have serious influence over its outcome, and the team can be none the wiser about it. But with the nature of the role being very behind the scenes in application, it's one of those things where it takes one to know one. You can have a general idea of how well you're playing as a top jungle mid and ADC through metrics like KDA, CS per minute, kill participation, rate of leveling, and so on. Very concrete metrics to grade your performance. Judging a support is a whole different can of worms. You could try to track them via vision score, but you can't track whether that vision score was actually productive. You could try to track them based on healing or shielding done, but there's no way of telling how many shields and heals actually clutched out a fight. It's not that simple. Honestly, those 4 words can sum up the entire challenge of playing support. It's not that simple. So often do we trivialize the amount of planning and foresight that goes into learning support properly, thinking all you have to do is put wards down whenever possible, land skill shots on enemy champions, and call it a day. But supports are evaluated on so much more than that. Sadly though, there will never be a time when people truly appreciate the full extent of a support's value because the job of a support is to usher the team to victory, to set them up in the best way possible and protect them from enemy threats by any means necessary. No one praises the construction workers and engineers for actually making the building, they praise the architect for the idea. Supports are the garbage men, the oil workers, the coal miners who do the stuff no one else wants to do, but that doesn't make them any less valuable. I find it hilariously ironic that people think of support as the role you play when you can't handle the pressure of playing a real carry role when in reality, a good support player can carry your team harder than any of the other 4 roles. It takes a unique skill set, significant macro knowledge of the game, and most crucially, superhuman levels of patience to guide 4 brainless monkeys who rarely, if ever, express gratitude for making their lives easier. The support is the glue that keeps the team together. Long and short of it is, we need to stop taking supports for granted. A good one can make your team feel like they're unstoppable, while at the same time gaslighting the enemy team into thinking there's nothing they can do. Also, of the 5 roles, they're the nicest players. Don't get me wrong, there are some toxic, egotistical bastards in there just like everywhere else, but overall it feels great to have a good support player on your team. I'm sure ADC mains can relate to how invincible you feel with a good support. Anyways though, be sure to let me know your thoughts on support in the comments down below. But for now, if you enjoyed the video, it would be great if you could leave a like and subscribe. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Vars, join my Discord server, and check out my other role discussions if you haven't yet. But till next time, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.